The Death of a Christian Economist, Part 1. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. Revelation 22, 11-12. Farming used to be the occupation of the vast majority of people in the United States. Year after year, the number of farms has continued dwindling, while the number of college-educated people employed in studying any remaining farms has been steadily increasing. Presidential candidate Ross Perot used to quip that there were more USDA employees than farmers, which might not have been far from the truth. As farms have disappeared, more and more food animals are being raised on huge factory farms, where the animals are squeezed together as tightly as can be managed. The USDA follows similar conventions in concentrating humans together for many hours per day, ostensibly to perform research on the nation's remaining agrarian enterprises. Having filled all of the available office space in its buildings in Washington, D.C., the big chiefs at the USDA looked to a small city in Colorado to establish the new Centers for Livestock Health, partly with the idea of giving field veterinarians something to do between livestock epidemics, purportedly to generate information relevant to farm animal health, and truthfully, to expand the federal bureaucracy within the confines of an influential congressman's home district. Nothing makes a federal manager more fulfilled than enlarging the number of souls under his dominion. And politicians, whatever their pretended stripe, like to be able to boast about federal money spent in their jurisdictions. The city is on the Front Range, adjacent to the frolicking foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Extending across the continent to the east is arid, dusty land where no trees grow for hundreds of miles. Driving an automobile eastward is like sailing a boat across a vast ocean where the view of the horizon is uninterrupted, and where the terrain's low, undulating hills are reminiscent of waves on the open sea. Tumbleweeds tumble across the landscape, and are the only indication that any plants ever grew anywhere near there. The city is more than an oasis, with verdant, weedless, carefully manicured lawns, flower gardens, and nursery-grown shade trees. Residents pour water from the city's reservoir onto their yards to make for lush landscapes as luxurious as any suburb along the eastern seaboard, except for one notable difference. Residential lawns there have a quilted pattern, where the hue of the lawn varies from yellowish to dark green, depending on how assiduously the homeowner fertilizes and waters. At least it used to be thus. The reservoir has been drying up. As you read this, the city may have already desiccated completely, its topography restored to its autochthonous state. The citizens may have hitherto fled to become climate refugees, leaving a ghost town behind. In the city, is an extraordinarily dull, boxy, dreary, rectangular office building, 3 stories high, as dull as any that might have been constructed on the outskirts of Moscow or Warsaw during the Soviet era. It is situated between the downtown section and the university. This is the building that the USDA chose to lease for its newly created Centers for Livestock Health. The Centers for Livestock Health comprises 4 distinct centers. The southern half of the edifice's 2nd floor houses the Center for Livestock Health Monitoring. Chin-high fabric walls divide the interior space into rectangular stalls, each containing a desk, a cheap chair, and a computer. High-status employees occupy offices with more expensive furniture, doors, and windows around the periphery. The highest status employee, the Grand Poobah, aka the center director, resides in what passes for luxury, the corner office, where she spends most of the day on the phone. Otto Stephen, an idiot who holds a doctoral degree in agricultural economics, dwells in the office adjacent to the Grand Poobah's. He has a strong, foul, pungent odor, similar to that of an outhouse on a hot summer's day. Patsy Nowak, a bright young university student, occupies a small cubicle with her service dog, a calm and devoted Rottweiler named Raven. Patsy has a part-time internship thanks to a special USDA program for individuals with disabilities. Patsy reads lips so well that you wouldn't know that she was deaf. She loves animals, and her ambition is to become a veterinarian. Patsy had started her internship 6 weeks earlier. On her first day, Otto, her supervisor, graciously welcomed her to the office. He struck up conversations to see what her interests were. It turned out that both of them played softball. Otto was particularly keen on gauging her religious and political views. His subtle denunciation of another employee as a liberal was calculated to assess her reaction. Patsy remained guarded on these subjects and endeavored not to reveal her thoughts, however much he would press her. He invited her to eat lunch with him in a restaurant a couple of times. Dutch treat, of course. Otto appeared to grow increasingly fond of her and invited her to his church. Patsy made excuses for the first 2 invitations, but finally agreed on the 3rd. Otto brought his wife, Lynette, and children to church early. Lynette sang in the choir, and the children had Sunday school activities. Otto then drove to Patsy's apartment to pick her up. She wore a red dress that she had recently bought at the Salvation Army store specifically for the occasion. Otto wore a cheap, ill-fitting polyester suit, which his wife had bought for him on sale at a discount clothing store a few years previous. Otto had showered that morning, so his odor wasn't too bad. Just a hint of stale urine, as it had been more than 2 months since Lynette had brought his suit to the dry cleaner. At church, Patsy and Lynette smiled, shook hands, and exchanged the customary pleasantries. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you. And you?" Otto and Patsy sat next to each other in his usual pew. Lynette, from her place in the choir, showed no signs of emotion as Otto's face beamed. After a couple of hymns and some Bible readings, the preacher began his sermon. Being somewhat new to the trade, the pastor did not exude anything close to the ebullience of a typical cable television evangelist. Still, the members of the congregation hung on his every word. The topic of the sermon was the second judgment, which only Christian believers are to face. Non-believers, including Catholics and most non-evangelical Christians, will be consigned to eternal damnation at the first judgment. A few Methodists or Presbyterians might slip through if they truly believed in Jesus Christ as Savior, but certainly no Episcopalians nor Adventists. In the second judgment, believers will be judged for their faithfulness in following Jesus Christ as Lord. Their works will determine what sorts of rewards they will receive in the hereafter. The preacher did not specify exactly what those rewards would be, nor how they would be divvied, but the faithfully zestfully lapped it up anyway. Otto, like most other church members, dutifully gave the full tithe to the church, expecting to be glorified with a magnificent eternity as a result. However tenuous the few biblical verses that back it up, the promise of extra goodies in the afterlife has proven to be a profitable motivator for many evangelical preachers. At the conclusion of the service, Patsy smiled dutifully and shook hands as Otto introduced her to his fellow congregants. He drove Patsy to her apartment and then returned to church. He brought his wife and children home, ate the meal that his wife had defrosted, and then returned to work alone in the office. When Patsy failed to express further interest in attending church, Otto became increasingly suspicious. He wondered whether she might be harboring some attitudes that might be characterized as liberal or even non-Christian. His church had taught him to be vigilant, as America, which had been uniquely blessed by God, was under constant siege by the evil and demonic forces of the Antichrist. Otto became markedly less friendly towards Patsy. He barely spoke to her and avoided eye contact. He continued to give her the typical mindless student-intern tasks to accomplish and barely acknowledged her existence, even when she completed his tasks.